This is to address Georgia's primary care provider shortage. HB 301 offers an appropriate and well-deserved incentive that will aid in growing the number of primary care providers in Georgia. Currently, we have a tax deduction for our community-based providers. HB 301 changes the current deduction to an income tax credit. This tax credit will encourage more providers to become preceptors. Those are the physicians, community-based physicians that will allow students to shadow them. These are for Georgia students only. And in our core primary care workforce programs, which are med students, PAs, and advanced practice registered nurses, again, they're Georgia programs. What we're trying to do is compete with some of the offshore and out-of-state programs that do currently pay preceptors. So again, this bill, HB 301, changes what was a deduction to a credit for these primary care providers. Do you have any questions? I would like to say that I know that the Georgia Nurses Association and many of the other medical associations are in favor of this as well.
Are there questions? There's a motion and a second to pass. Is there any discussion? I think the committee's heard all they want to hear from you today, Representative Lott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Motion is carried and goes to rules. All right, House Bill 265, Representative Efstration, LC 345138S.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, this legislation implements the Quality Jobs Tax Credit as another tool to give Georgia companies a driver of economic growth. Companies with longer range growth plans have found it challenging to meet the existing 12-month deadline for creating 50 quality jobs in order to earn the existing Quality Jobs Tax Credit. This bill would allow for more time, that's an additional 12 months, to meet the 50 job threshold for those outside of strategic industries to qualify more jobs for the tax credit. This is necessary in order to allow for these types of projects to be pursued in Georgia. Additionally, the bill would provide an opportunity for utilization of the tax credit with a company that has already used it but intends to bring an additional operations center to the state of Georgia. They would not have to wait for the existing 7-year window under this bill. Section 2 of the bill provides for a sales tax exemption for tangible personal property used for the renovation or expansion of a theater, and there is a window that's provided for this of July of 2017 until January of 2019, as well as a cap of $750,000. We'd be happy to answer any questions and would ask for the committee's favorable consideration.
Are there questions? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the committee? There's a motion and a second to pass. Is there discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Passes on to rules. House Bill 118, LC number 430586 ERS. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me the opportunity to present here. I come before you today with House Bill 118, the Registered Fantasy Contest Operators Act. This is a piece of legislation which will clarify to the 1.5 million Georgians that are currently enjoying fantasy sports contests in our state. Fantasy sports contests are opportunities for individuals to study data, to practice, to use the skill they've earned through this study and practice, to pick a lineup of individuals to participate, where you then compete against others based on then the performance of the team that you've put together. This measure, much like other skilled contests that we put forth in Georgia, are like bass tournaments, golf tournaments, skeet shoots, things that require skill. It's a different type of skill than many of us have, but it's certainly a skill, and so we're making clear that that's allowed under Georgia law. We have the bill starts out with some definitions, moves on to some consumer safeguards that are put in place through this measure. Currently, as we said, 1.5 million Georgians are operating in this space today. We feel like there needs to be some common sense, conservative consumer protections put in place on this measure, and we have done that there. Finally, we recognize that some of this, the oversight of this registration process will require some funds to administer, so we have some revenue measures in the bill to help us do that. Mr. Chairman, I think we've debated this bill, and I'll be glad to take any questions.
Representative Teasley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Kelly. I got to admit, when you brought up the bass fishing, I had a reaction to that. I've been playing fantasy football since I was in college. When I went to the library and I wrote down from the box scores how the points would go out. So I'm very familiar with fantasy football, in particular, and I also know I can draft a really good team and do very poorly. I know this from firsthand experience this past fantasy football season. My question is, what, in your view, why is this bill needed? Because I currently can play, and nothing has done anything to impede me being able to play fantasy football. Why would we need to do this?
Well, first, in these contests, we've seen where some operators in the market have promised prize offerings for winners of this, and then they haven't been able to pay out. And so we felt like there's the crux of this bill is making sure there's consumer protections in place for those who are wanting to participate in these actual fantasy contests.
Okay.
Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, like Representative Teasley, I've had good experiences with the years that I put a lot of effort into trying to look at the statistics and have some extra bandwidth on my plate. I do better in the years that I just trying to rush through it and put my draft together and pick my lineup haphazardly. I don't do well. Help me understand. This is one area that I'm not familiar with. The difference between daily and seasonal. That's a phrase I'm not familiar with, but I hear that brought up a little bit. Help me understand. Is there a difference between daily and, because I know the seasonal track currently.
I'll answer that question, but I want to point out something that you said there. And that's that in times where you've really worked, where you've really studied, where you've really exercised skill in trying to set your lineup and things, that you've performed better than at times when you've just kind of not paid attention, when you've let things kind of happen at random. So that's where I talk about the skill component here. But getting to your question about the difference between daily fantasy and season is just a time frame. Both are allowed under this measure. You'll still have a ability to play seasonal, and the daily is just a contest, except for just one Sunday. If you're talking about football, for maybe one Sunday out of the entire season versus a running total of all.
Follow-up question, if I may. So,
Absolutely.
Am I still picking not the outcome, but I'm picking the quarterback, the defense, special teams? If I'm looking at the football scenario, or in the baseball scenario, I'm looking at putting a lineup together, batting order, all the same scenarios in both daily and seasonal.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Rutledge.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To follow up on Representative Teasley's why do we need this? As a business owner here in Georgia, I have to pay income tax, federal and state, correct? These companies are operating in the state of Georgia now,
Absolutely.
right? They're paying federal tax?
Yes.
Not state tax?
There's no.
Okay.
Any further questions? What's the pleasure of the committee? All right, there's a motion to pass. Is there a second? Got a motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. It moves on to rules. Anybody want to present Chuck's bill? Chuck's bill. Someone dealing with the electric go-karts or whatever it is. Mhm. All right, we're going to call House Bill 352. I do not see Chairman Martin here in the room, but this is a relative simple bill. And I'll ask Representative Kelly, since he's already warmed up, to present.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just another bill clarifying Georgia law as it exists today. When we did House Bill 170, we know we have a section there that talks about alternative fueled vehicles. And we wanted to just make clear in this legislation that vehicles that are low speed or those that are electric-powered personal transportation vehicles do not fall under that measure. So this, talking with the authors of HB 170 and the debate that went on at that time, it was never meant to encompass those measures. However, there have been some instances where people have tried to attack them and subject them to the tax that goes there and the fees. And so we're just clarifying the Georgia law on that.
Are there questions? Is that Representative Carson? Is that your light? No. Okay. All right, there's a motion to pass. Is there a second? Second. Motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes on to rules. All right, you're going to have to do the next one because that's me.
We're now going to take up House Resolution 158, Chairman Powell's measure, LC 3451265. Chairman Powell.
This is a constitutional amendment, and it is something that we have been discussing for at least as long as I've been in the legislature, which is what do we do about dedicated fees under current constitutional provision. The legislature by statute cannot dedicate fees, that only by constitutional amendment can fees be dedicated to a particular purpose. We do it, but any subsequent legislature can by appropriation undo it. And the only way that we can truly dedicate is through the Constitution. But there's a need from time to time that we have something in between. And so this is a constitutional amendment that would allow the legislature under certain circumstances to dedicate fees. And those fee dedications would be limited to no more than 1% total of the previous year's budget, would require a sunset of 10 years or less in the fee dedication bill. The fee dedication bill would have to pass by a 2/3 majority in both houses and would have to refer to that particular constitutional provision in order to be governed by it. And it also would be subject to, in times of economic emergency declared by the governor, for a suspension of up to a 2-year period for the fee dedication, so that it could be used for other purposes during a time of financial emergency. And we would be allowed 3 2-year periods during any 10-year period, if that were to continue in effect. And that's pretty much the crux of it. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Got a few questions. Is that
Representative Teasley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. More a comment than anything else. I absolutely love what this is doing, and I appreciate the commitment to transparency in government. We talked about this in subcommittee, how this is intended to make it clear to the general public when we dedicate funds on a measure from this, that you can hold government accountable on this. And so I just want to say thank you. It's a good bill.
Representative Duncan?
Just wanted to echo Representative Teasley's comments and also thank you for allowing me to co-sign the bill with you. It's a great piece of legislation. Look forward to seeing it pass.
Any other questions? All right, let's count the votes. All those in favor, or let's have a motion.
Move to pass.
Second.
All right,
All right.
wait. I think there's an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Likewise, I'm strongly supportive of this idea. The one concern I have is whether we need to further clarify what constitutes a financial emergency. And what I would recommend is that we, on line 43, after financial emergency of this in the state, after the comma, we insert language that reads, and I'm certainly happy to continue to massage it, but where such financial emergencies shall be deemed to exist when current year revenue collections fall 3% or more below the fiscal year revenue estimate. And that way we would know that it's actually an emergency and not simply we overspent our budget.
We'll take that in the form of a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the Abrams amendment, make it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Bill's now amended.
And then get past the original bill.
Now we'll take up the substitute to House Resolution 158 as amended by committee. All those in favor, make it known by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, like sign. Bill's now on rolls.
Unless I have omitted a bill, which I did last time, but I think I kept up with them this time. That's all the business that we have to come before the committee. We are adjourned.